Hey guys, JM here. Hey, quick question for you to start us off. What was your favorite game growing up? Some of us might have to think about it, but for me, the answer comes to mind right away. See, me and all the kids in my neighborhood growing up, we had this game called Bike Tag, and it was awesome. So essentially, Bike Tag is a version of tag, but you play it on both your bike and on your feet. So it gets kind of crazy. And so what we used to do is we used to get all the kids in the neighborhood together by knocking on their door and gathering in this one central place, okay? And then we would have these massive groups of people playing. And yes, people did crash their bikes at times. So the way that the game would work was our entire block was the boundary, right? Including people's yards, bushes, trees, backyards, even if we didn't know them. It was crazy. And like our friend's dad, Dave, used to play with us sometimes too. And this one time he was hiding behind a bush trying to hide from me. And one of our old lady neighbors named Nancy thought he was trying to kidnap me. And we were like, Nancy, put the broomstick away. He's one of us. And then like another time my friend told me to, hide in a bush with him, but then there was a wasp nest and then we all got stung. It was the worst. And then another time I yeeted my bike across the street so that I could steal my buddy's bike. Basically, you guys get the picture. It was crazy. It was chaos, but it was so fun. And I think the reason the game worked so well was because there were only two rules. Don't get caught by a player or an angry neighbor, and don't get hurt so that we could keep playing. It was simple. And yet sometimes there'd be like this one kid who would either be making up rules or would get too worried that other people weren't following the rules, and then they'd get all mad and kind of ruin the vibes for everybody. Have you ever had an experience like that where you had a friend or knew someone at school or on a team that was just like way too obsessed with what other people were doing and if they were following the rules? I know what you guys are thinking. You're saying to me, JM, we all know people who are too obsessed with rules. We play games with the grade 12 boys every week. And you would be right. But besides them, because that answer is too obvious, anybody else come to mind? See, being too obsessed with the rules of a game can kind of be paralyzing because you can't actually play it well when you're worried about everybody else. But the thing is, the guidelines for playing a game are also important, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Too many rules is a total drag, but we all need to have a few in place to keep the structure of whatever we're playing stays intact, right? In fact, games actually can't exist at all when there aren't any guidelines or boundaries on how to play. Games also don't work at all when people blatantly go against them. On our youth leader team, we actually call this game breaking, and that's when people don't follow the rules at all or are too obsessed with what other people are doing that they don't even play themselves. And even worse, you ever seen like an individual or a group that wanted other people to follow the rules of a game but didn't want to follow them themselves? I know I keep mentioning the grade 12 boys, but stick with me for a second here, okay? I find that life works this way too. You ever notice that? Like the people who are so concerned about what everyone else is doing or not doing never actually play well themselves, and their team rarely wins, if ever. See, sometimes we can be so worried about making sure that other people are following the rules or what we think the rules should be that we aren't even able to follow them ourselves. Like in my own life, when I'm too obsessed with worrying about what other people are doing, I can get so focused on them that I actually forget to do the stuff that I'm mad at them for doing or not doing. This is called hypocrisy. And you may have heard of this word before, or maybe you haven't. But essentially, being a hypocrite means you hold other people to a standard of living that you can't keep yourself or intentionally don't keep yourself. Hey, and that's what happened back in Jesus' day too. And it still happens today. You guys probably can resonate with that example. See, there was this time Jesus was hanging out and having a discussion with Pharisees. Now, if you guys remember from other talks this year that we've done, the Pharisees back in Jesus' day were like experts at following and creating tons of rules. And they created so many rules and regulations for how they felt people needed to live that it ended up being impossible for everyone, including themselves, to actually follow all of them. I'm talking thousands, not hundreds, thousands of rules around simple things, including how many steps you should be able to take on your day of rest or how many letters you could write on your day off. Like imagine being told on your day off that if you send a certain number of text messages or if you go on a walk that's 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes, that you should be punished and shunned by your family. You'd be like, what? Quick side note. I feel like whenever I talk to you guys about Jesus, I often intro this conversation by saying that Jesus was talking to Pharisees or was being challenged by Pharisees or was having a debate with Pharisees. And to be honest, this is because Jesus' teachings and the way Jesus sees the world will almost always clash with religious systems and with people of power. It's just a fact. He's not worried about rules and religions. His desire is to have relationship. And so those two things don't go together. So anyways, Jesus is talking with these guys, and as was often the case, the Pharisees are trying to have a moment where they can undermine Jesus and discredit him. And since we're still talking about Jesus 2,000 years later, it's low-key almost as big of a choke job the Pharisees had as the Leafs currently are having right now. So as the Pharisees are trying to undermine Jesus, they have a lawyer come up with a question to trick him. And if there's anything we all know about lawyers, it's that they are good at asking questions. If any of you have lawyers as parents, my sincerest condolences on never winning an argument in your entire lifetime. Here's the question that the Pharisees' lawyers came up with. It's in Matthew 22. Teacher, which command in God's law is the most important? Seems simple enough, right? But that is a heavy question. Hey, based on what you know about God, whether that be a lot or a little, what do you think you would say if someone asked you that question? What's most important to God? Why don't you turn to the people around you and have a quick chat around that? Okay, let's take a look at what Jesus says is most important to God. Jesus replies, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Okay, let's talk about the first half of this really quick. Jesus says our first goal in life is to love God with our heart, soul, and mind. So what does this mean? Essentially, our first call in life, you guys, the main goal of the game is to love God with our whole being. Every piece of who we are, how we act, how we think, what we consume or don't consume, what we watch, listen to, how we talk about other people, even people we disagree with, which I'm still working on. It all matters. And a part of this is also acknowledging that because we're created by a good God, that just doing whatever we want all the time isn't actually being free at all. One of the most prominent early Christians, Paul, says this in Romans 6. What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument of righteousness. Did you catch that? Every part of us belongs to God. In other words, your heart, your soul, and your mind. This is a beautiful tension, you guys. Don't miss this, okay? You are too worth it to get caught up in too many rules, making it difficult to find Jesus. And the freedom we find in God means we are too valuable to just do whatever we want all the time, especially if it's going to harm us. It might be easy to sit on our chairs and say, well, duh. But the Pharisees devoted their entire lives to reading scripture, and they believed they were good people. The fact is, you guys, there are a lot of people that think they're better than others because they follow all the rules or don't follow any rules at all. People who think they are more worthy because of what they do or don't do, they miss the plot of God's story. Even though following Jesus is simple, it can be hard. In our humanness, we sometimes make things more difficult than they need to be, right? It is very possible to know a lot about Jesus without knowing Jesus at all. It's possible to have a lot of head knowledge about God's teachings without knowing his heart. And sometimes, church people, we miss the mark on what matters because we've memorized the Bible, but we forget why it's written in the first place. So what Jesus is saying is our main goal is hard, but it's not complicated. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. So how do we start? Let's look at the second half of the verse we read earlier. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. You guys, this is perfect. So in other words, loving your neighbor as yourself is loving God with all your heart, soul, and your mind. Jesus mentions this because what he's saying, how you honor a creator is how we love their creation. And since all of us are created by God, one of the best ways to love God is to love each other. Think about it like this. If you love a movie, the best way to let a film director know that their movie is great is to show them that it matters by watching it. Jesus is so serious about this that a couple years later, one of Jesus' friends, John, says, whoever says they love God but hates a brother or sister, they're a liar. Guys, this is important stuff. Don't miss this. Stick with me. It is impossible to love God if we don't love others. I'm going to say something here, and it may come across a little harsh, so you gotta stay with me on this, okay? Because I think it's so important, especially as we get ready for summertime and we're going off to work at camp or do SLP or volunteer or go on vacation, join sports teams or do summer jobs or hang out with friends or even just scrolling at the socials on our phone, okay? If our theology makes it hard for people to get to know Jesus, then it's bad theology. Or let me put it another way for those of us that aren't really familiar with the word theology, okay? If what we believe about Jesus makes it hard for others to find Jesus, then we might not actually know Jesus as well as we think we do. So this summer, things might get crazy for you at times, right? That's probably true. In fact, for those of you that are going to camp, I guarantee it's true that things will get crazy. Things will go wrong. People will be annoying. It may not be a perfect season. But what would it look like if we had the posture of everyone we come across being worthy? How would that change the world around us? Here's the bottom line. And it's actually a quote from Everything Everywhere All at Once, Oscar winner film. It's so good. Okay, one of the characters says this: the only thing I know is that we have to be kind. Please be kind, especially when we don't know what's going on. You guys, don't get caught up who's in and who's out. God invites everyone to the table. Sure, it's hard to remember to keep it simple all the time. I'm working on this too. But when you're in the middle of a game and things get intense, it matters to remember this. When you don't know what's going on, when you don't know what to do next, when the world seems to be going crazy around you, when you're not sure what the rules are, remember this. Jesus says, keep it simple. Remember two things. Love the Lord your God with everything you are. And the easiest way to do this is to love others in a way that honors their creator with dignity and respect. Because just like we have been saying all year, you matter. And everyone you meet this summer, so do they. See you guys later.